If you want a 7-seater SUV that focuses on fun and dynamic driving, this could be the one for you. Welcome to the garage on Ride By. So for today's first ride review, we have the highly anticipated Mitsubishi Destinator. So this is this SUV occupies sort of a weird space in the current local SUV market because it's a bit bigger than your usual mid-size crossover with 7 seats, and it has a turbocharged engine packing more power than a lot of the competition. But before anything else, we are here at the CDS Off-Road Playground at the Arden Botanical Estate. And the reason why we are here is because this car is actually a lot of fun, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, let's talk about some of the things that you and I might come to expect from the Mitsubishi Destinator when living with it on a daily basis. Let's start off with the styling. So, dito sa harapan, you can see the Destinator makes use of Mitsubishi's ubiquitous dynamic shield design language. So over here, you get a massive front grille and LED headlights with daytime running lights. Down on the bottom, you get this aggressive lower bumper here that gives the car a two-tone finish. So this dark gray goes really well with the dark blue bodywork of the car. So moving on to the side, the rugged SUV elements, they continue here with these flat black fender flares and body cladding down here on the running boards that extends all the way to the back. So the wheels consist of two-tone 18-inch alloy wheels with Bridgestone Turanza tires measuring 225/55 R18. So, moving on to the rear of the Destinator, you will see some familiar styling cues here. Those of you who are familiar with the Mitsubishi X-Force will see some resemblance here, but this is a bit more rugged, a bit wider. You get more rugged SUV elements down here, such as this bottom bumper part, which kind of looks like a stepboard, pero malambot siya. It's not really meant to be stepped on, but it does give it that high-riding SUV look. So the Mitsubishi Destinator measures in at 4,680 millimeters long, 1,840 millimeters wide, 1,780 millimeters tall. It has a wheelbase of 2,815 millimeters. Ground clearance sits at a respectable 214 millimeters. Okay, so under the hood of the Mitsubishi Destinator is the 4B40 engine, a 1.5-liter inline-4 turbocharged engine. So this thing produces around 160 horsepower and 250 Newton meters of torque, putting it on the healthier end of the spectrum when it comes to power output for SUVs of this segment. Okay, let's move on to the inside of this car. So as you can see, let's start up, foot on the brake, and a start-stop engine switch. So as we can see, this interior looks also fairly familiar. It kind of borrows a lot of elements from Mitsubishi's other vehicles. So you can see the steering wheel. We've seen this before in the Triton, as well as this sort of seamless looking infotainment and gauge cluster, which kind of looks like it came out of the X-Force. That said, the interior is very well appointed. You get flat plastic here, hard plastic here, soft touch elements over here, as well as on the doors. You get a leather wrapped steering wheel, which makes everything feel very premium. Apologies for the dust on the inside. As you can see, we're here in an off-road course. You'll see in a little bit just why this car is so dusty and just how much fun it is to drive. But before that, let's take a look at the interior amenities. So this massive dash, this massive infotainment measures around 12-ish inches, 12.3 inches. And it features a breadth of information. So right here, you have all of your telemetry, basically. You have here your brake, coolant, injection, all of those things that you can check out. There's also a menu here that lets you choose several apps that are built into the car. So this car does come with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. You can also adjust several things through this display. You can do your wallpaper player if you have photos. You can load your multimedia there. You can also adjust the ambient lighting. So there's a lot. You can choose the colors, all of that you'd appreciate, especially at night. What else can we do here? You have the sunroof settings, you have USB in photos, so you can plug in your flash drive or your phone. It'll show the photos on your phone on the display. You can also You know, you can choose your drive modes over here, but there's also another switch for the drive modes, which I will show you guys later on. Moving on to the gauge cluster over here, this is also a fully digital unit, albeit it's recessed inside the shroud. So I think that's para hindi masyadong mag-glare when you're driving in sunny weather. It features a medyo 80s inspired, parang Atari graphics yung kanyang design, no? So it has a speedometer up top, a tachometer just below the speedometer. On the left, you get your temp gauge, and on the right, you get a fuel gauge. So at first, medyo busy, you know, parang you'd think it's a bit cluttered. Pero in reality, it's actually very easy to use. Also worth noting here is that you can actually change the display type by going into the menu and clicking here. So click display type, and you'll see that it kind of changes. It's still a bit, you know, I wouldn't say it's minimalist. There's still a lot going on. But this definitely is a much cleaner look. If you like, you know, a more clean and a more minimalist looking dash. But personally, I prefer the previous design, the Atari looking display type. So let's go back to that. Now, another thing you can do with the display cluster here is you can actually adjust the driver assistance. So unlike other cars, when you switch off your ADAS, when you switch off traction control, you just press a button on the side. Dito, medyo you have to dig into the menus. And I think that's more of a safety feature. It's more of like, so Mitsubishi wants you to not really mess around with the features right away. So to disable traction control, as you can see, I've toggled the ASC or the stability control, and you just press that, and that disables your traction control and stability control for when you're driving off-road. And as for the steering wheel itself, it's pretty comprehensive. You get your audio controls here on the left, you get your cruise control here on the right, and of course that very nice leather wrap upholstery that makes it feel very sporty. Moving on to the center stack, you get good old-fashioned tactile climate controls. Sorry, thank you Mitsubishi for that. No need to dig in through the menus of the screen to adjust your aircon temperature, your fan speed, and all of that. You get a wireless charger down here in the middle, but you also get two USB Type-C plugs here, a cigarette-style lighter socket down here for a 12-volt power adapter, and a wireless charger down in the middle. Here you get a good old-fashioned automatic gear stick selector. This is a CVT, but it's nice that you get to actually leave the gear selector where you last left it. Hindi siya parang dial in newer cars. The start-stop engine is here in the middle, which might be kind of odd for some because like ako personally, I'm used to it being here or here, but it's here. So you here naman are where, you know, the star of the show basically when it comes to the performance features of the Destinator. This is the drive mode selector. So once you flick that, you will see on screen lalabas yung mga drive modes niya. So we have normal, we have wet, we have gravel, tarmac, and mud. So now all of this, you know, it really ramdam na ramdam mo siya when you activate these certain drive modes in the way na it really changes the way the throttle responds to your input. So in normal mode, basically eco mode, you're driving around the city, around town, that's perfectly fine. Once you switch it to wet, it kind of dumbs down the throttle response a little bit para hindi dumulas yung wheels mo when you're accelerating. Gravel makes it even more dumbed down kasi gravel has very loose traction, diba? But when you switch it to tarmac mode, it makes it a bit sporty, so parang mas mabilis yung throttle response niya. And when you flick this button here on the side of the gear stick to sport mode, so it really makes everything very sharp and dynamic. Now, what else? So here, as you can see, we have two cup holders here. We have a big flask, kasha siya, and a bit of a smaller flask here, so they fit perfectly. So perfect for road trips or just for your daily essentials. Here, the center console is very big. It's also ventilated, so meron siyang vent for aircon, so you can put stuff there and they're gonna cool down. The seats are also nice, no? They're leather upholstered, they're adjustable, power adjust, forward, back, up and down. You can even adjust the tilt of the seat as well as, of course, the recline. So, a very comprehensive and very well-equipped interior. Let's take a look at the back seats. Okay, now moving on to the back seats of the Destinator. First thing you're gonna notice is this is actually a fold-out table. It's not like your usual fold-out table. This is actually very well made. I think matibay talaga siya. You can actually eat here. You can put a tablet here. It has a cup holder here. So ang galing. Is there a fold-down? No, there's no fold-down. Oh, there is. Pull a lever, a tab here, and this folds down for even more cup holders. This can be like your personal little office space here, guys. And of course, let's not forget, there's also a panoramic sunroof up here, which you can toggle with the front here. You can open the glass or just slide the tonneau cover back. As for legroom, as you can see, very spacious. I'm actually very comfortable here seated with the seat recline because you can recline the back seats here like that. And can you move them forward? Yes, you can move them forward and back as well. So you can actually get a very comfy seating position here with the back seats of the Destinator. And as someone who is 5'8", I have no shortage of legroom at all. I have no shortage of headroom. Even sitting in the middle, kasi nga front wheel drive siya, it's still adequate. Siguro kahit 6-footer ka, kakasya ka pa rin dito eh. You can't slide. Can you slide? You can slide this whole thing forward too. Yeah, the whole thing slides forward and back. So very comprehensive rear. Also here you will notice there is a separate climate control function here in the middle. So it shows you, maganda siya, yung visualization is very easy to see and adjust. You can turn on and off the aircon. And you have two USB ports here, a USB-C and a USB-A. Very comprehensive interior. Let's take a look at the third row since this is, after all, a 7-seater. So how do you access the third row? It's actually very simple. So unlike other newer cars that make use of an electronic actuator or switch, it's a good old-fashioned lever here. Pull this forward and the front seat tumbles forward like that. Either pwede mong ganunin or you can just slide the whole thing forward if you're a bit smaller and just crawl in the back like this, no problem. I will admit though that this is not the best place to be, especially when you have this up and reclined. So maybe for kids, yeah, or if you're just shuttling around town, around the city, maybe 20-30 minutes, here it's just perfectly fine. You still get your own aircon vents too here, so that's a very nice addition. Hindi ka maiitan dito despite it being a little bit cramped. And look, yeah, there's aircon vents here on the second row, and there's aircon vents here in the third row. There's even USB ports here. Grabe guys, and a cup holder too. Very well equipped third row, all things considered. Yeah. Okay. Now let's look at the cargo bay. Now let's take a look at the rear cargo bay. So it does have a power assist tailgate. So that's very handy, and it's something pretty cool for a car at this price point, which I will talk about a bit later on. So right here with this third row seats up, there's not a lot of space, but let's be real, 90% of the time that you're driving this car, you will actually have this third row folded down, like so. And that unlocks quite a lot of space. Even if you put up the second row seats, no, ang dami pa ring space niyan. Balikbayan boxes, strollers for your kids, maybe even some camping equipment for a weekend out of town. But like this, with the second and third rows folded completely flat, it's basically like a van. You can put a bicycle, maybe several bicycles in here. You can put plants, you can put, I don't know, anything you want to put in there, making it very versatile when it comes to cargo space. So with all that out of the way, let's get behind the wheel and show you guys what this thing is really built for, driving. So now we are behind the wheel of the Mitsubishi Destinator, and as I mentioned earlier, we are in the CDS off-road playground at the Arden Botanical Estate. And that's because, surprisingly, this car is actually pretty fun to drive even here in an off-road setting. So right now, we are driving through the medyo flat track section of the off-road park, and I have the vehicle's traction controls and stability control switched off. It is also now on gravel mode, and it makes driving this car actually surprisingly very easy. Now the 1.5 turbocharged engine, no, it has a lot of power and a lot of torque. It really does quick work of this kind of terrain. Parang it's not even stressed out at all carrying relative speed in off-road loose gravel terrain like this. But when you pick up the pace, that's when things get seriously fun. So how do you do that? You can actually stick it into tarmac mode while having traction control switched off, and that way you get to unlock the full power of this engine while driving on this kind of terrain. Take note, however, if you're medyo beginner when it comes to driving spiritedly in loose and low traction surfaces, you might not want to try this, but since we are here in a controlled environment, we're gonna go ahead and give it a shot. So right now you can see we are carrying quite a bit of pace and everything still feels very well dialed in. So the steering input on this car, no, it is front-wheel drive, but it is also very sharp and very direct. Like here, driving through this technical terrain, this technical course in the CDS off-road playground, it's still a very, very point-and-shoot type of deal when it comes to, you know, driving this car at speed. The brakes are also surprisingly sharp and very, very direct, all things considered, you know, despite there hardly being any traction. So, konting apak lang sa throttle, nagwe-wheel spin na siya. Pero despite all that, no, the car remains composed and very, very much drivable and controllable. And I think that all boils down to the technology that Mitsubishi has baked into this car, yung AYC, or the Active Yaw Control. So those of you rally art fans would be familiar with that, because that's a feature that came standard, you know, back in the day with the Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution. And now Mitsubishi is actually integrating that technology to its more, you know, its economical lineup. So let's talk a bit more about that Active Yaw Control, or yung AYC nga na tinatawag. So the way it works is basically, it's basically a torque vectoring system. It has sensors on each wheel that detect slip and detect wheel spin, and they apply the brakes on each individual wheel to mitigate that effect. So it's similar to what other manufacturers have, yung mga torque vectoring controls, because this car doesn't have an LSD, doesn't have a limited slip differential, but it kind of acts that way because it really makes the car more pointed when it comes to handling. It makes the understeer less noticeable and far more controllable. Speaking of suspension naman, so right now we're tackling some really, really rough terrain. The suspension of this car is fairly simple. It comes with a McPherson suspension setup at front and a torsion beam at the back. But it is tuned for not just daily driving comfort, but also dynamic driving just like this. So now those of you who have been fans of Mitsubishi for the longest time would know that it built its reputation in the world of rally. And that heritage, you know, it's not, hindi siya pilit, no, when it comes to this particular model. It really feel it shining through with the technology I mentioned earlier, as well as the way that the chassis is designed and balanced. So, you know, the what do you call this? The halo cars of the rally art era, you know, the Lancer Evolution, the Pajero Evolution, those cars are, unfortunately, they are long gone. However, their spirit carries on in cars like this. You know, the Mitsubishi Destinator, a car that is designed as a 7-seater family hauler. It's nice to see that, you know, in a world that's obsessed with chasing horsepower figures, all the technology, you get a car like this, a car that is well balanced, something that has, you know, 160 horsepower, 250 Nm of torque, not super remarkable in terms of numbers alone, but in terms of feel and driving precision, it is very, very rewarding. Okay, now, so the Destinator's road-going manners are as you would expect. You know, it's not exactly a high rider like the Montero, but it isn't a low car either. No, it has relatively good ground clearance, around 220 millimeters of ground clearance, and the suspension, despite it being very capable off-road, is also very comfortable on road. You don't get a lot of body roll. You don't get a lot of that floaty feeling you get pagka yung kalsada medyo may undulations, diba? Yung mga ibang crossover parang feel mo lumulutang eh. This one feels very planted and very stable on the road. And you know, that's down to suspension and chassis tuning, as I mentioned earlier. Also worth noting, in this top-of-the-line GT trim, you get a full ADAS suite, you get your adaptive cruise control, you get your lane departure assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alerts, everything you could ask for. But yes, it does come at a premium because this top-of-the-line model costs a few $100,000 more than the mid-end base model offerings. Okay, now of course, something everyone has to consider when buying a vehicle like this is of course fuel economy. So this car, you know, it has a 1.5-liter engine, but it's important to remember that it is turbocharged and it has a lot of power. It has around 160 horsepower, and with power comes, you know, you have to pay the price when it comes to fuel economy. So this one, you know, on the highway, consistent highway driving around 100 kilometers per hour, you can get 12, 13 kilometers per liter, sometimes even 14 if you're very, very frugal. Pero in the city and in provincial roads like this, you're looking at anywhere between 8 to 9 kilometers per liter. So average 10 kilometers per liter, still very respectable because don't forget just exactly how big this car is, no? 7-seater siya, 7-seater crossover with fairly, you know, large dimensions, making it still, you know, still one of the more efficient vehicles in its class. Wow! There you have it, guys. A quick first ride review of the Mitsubishi Destinator. Before anything else, huge shout out to Cho de los Santos of CDS Off-Road Playground here at the Arden Botanical Estate. Thank you so much for letting us use your amazing off-road facilities. If you guys want to check it out, check them out on their Facebook page. And you can actually have a whole day's worth of fun of off-road riding, driving, and even mountain biking in this massive estate. So now, let's talk about this car and our ratings. Let's start off with performance. Performance-wise, you get a really impressive engine. You get that 1.5-liter turbocharged engine with around 160 horsepower, around 215 meters of torque. You get a CVT, fine, but the driving modes more than make up for that. It's very responsive and very peppy. Off-road here in this terrain, it's very rewarding to drive, despite it just being a front-wheel drive vehicle and having a fairly rudimentary suspension setup. Despite all that, it just goes to show that you don't need sophisticated parts and fancy technology to really have a good car. Performance-wise, seriously guys, 9 out of 10 for this car. Now we move on to handling. So as I mentioned earlier, this car has a fairly rudimentary, dare I say archaic, suspension system consisting of a McPherson strut up front and a torsion beam at the back. Nevertheless, out on the road, even here on loose gravel off-road terrain, this thing handles like a dream. It's proof that you don't need cutting-edge technology, electronic suspension to get a very rewarding drive. And because of that, I'll give this car a solid 10 out of 10 when it comes to handling. Wow! Next, we go to utility or versatility. So, I showed you a while ago just how spacious this car is. Inside the front seats and the back seats, you get a lot of legroom and a lot of headroom. The third row, even for someone my size, I'm not exactly slender and slim, I fit comfortably in the third row of this car. And as for cargo, when you fold the second and the third row flat, it basically becomes a van. So there's really not more you can ask for when it comes to versatility with this car. Another solid 10 out of 10 for me. Now we go to styling. How do you guys like the styling of this Destinator? As I mentioned earlier, the dynamic shield design language, a lot of edges, makanto siya, macho siya. It gets wide, very wide SUV-like road presence. Personally, I'm a big fan. It's a very modern, a very sleek look. It actually rivals SUVs that are bigger in its class, like the Montero, the Fortuner. I'd say the styling rivals those cars. Despite that, you get the comfort of a unibody crossover. So I think it's the best of both worlds. So 9.5 out of 10 when it comes to styling for me. Now we move on to value for money. So this particular Destinator, this is the top of the line, the GT CVT variant. It's gonna cost you 1,929,000. Now that might be a little bit pricey, but not everyone needs the sophisticated ADAS. Not everyone needs the fancy electronic features that this car brings to the table. And as such, there are also two other more affordable variants. The base model, GLX, which is around 1.3, 1.4, and the GLS, which goes from mga 1.5 to 1.6 M. Now that is seriously good value for money, especially considering the size. It's priced like a 5-seater subcompact crossover, but you get definitely much bigger proportions and much more performance and utility. So overall pricing for the Destinator model range, I'd have to give it a 9.5 out of 10. So overall rating for this car, this is a car I've been waiting to drive ever since it was launched in the local market. And I must say, it has not disappointed me at all. It's a very fun car to drive. Performance-wise, it handles very, very sharply considering its size. It looks good. It has enough space for your entire family, your kids, and a weekend's worth of stuff for an out-of-town road trip. So because of that, Mitsubishi Destinator, 9.5 out of 10. So there you have it, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned to the Garage on Ride By for the first ride written review of this vehicle. Like, comment, share, subscribe to our channel. I'll see you in the next video.